Welcome to another episode of Builders, Budgets, and Beers. Today we are joined with Melissa Leediker from Turquant Builder Services in Fort Worth, Texas. Today, Melissa and I, we're going to be talking about the three most common and costly errors in construction accounting. There are a lot of opportunities for costly and common errors in construction accounting, but Melissa dwindles us down to three specific pieces, all with a ton of examples and use cases, along with some quick tips and tactics to prevent them from happening to you. Let's go ahead and jump in. All right, Melissa, we're live. How are you?
I'm good. I always jinx people. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. That's where we're just getting into the cadence. We're just getting into the flow. It's all good. We'll find the groove. Really appreciate you being on today. Super excited for our listeners to get in the mind of Melissa Leediker. If you don't mind just giving the audience a little bit of a background on yourself, your business, the service you provide, just some of the basics.
Sure. So I own Turquant Builder Services. Started out my business just doing small business bookkeeping. Had a local builder that really needed a lot of help. He happened to be a custom builder. Really dug into what he needed, processes, software, all the things. And from doing a lot of work with him, it became really obvious that this was an industry that not only did I enjoy, but it was also complicated enough that it would keep me interested. So from there on, I was really pursuing builders, mostly custom builders, some production here and there, some folks that do specs. And then, of course, custom builders do remodels and spec houses and a good mix. So you end up having to be pretty good at all of it. But it's been a lot of fun. I really love all my clients and the opportunities that I get working with them. So it's been great.
Love it. No, and Melissa, even just getting to know you over the last couple of years, like your passion is certainly there. You had mentioned that like the very first customer, the custom home builder. How long ago was that?
That was 5 years ago.
Okay, so you've been just construction accounting deep for half a decade.
Yeah, and it's been so good. I mean, you know me, I'm a freaking nerd, but I love it. I love all the numbers.
Of course. Well, and you also mentioned like the nuance that comes with it. Not even like, I mean, obviously there's a ton of nuance to construction accounting, but even just the space itself, right? It's not just a spec builder. It's not just a custom home builder. It's not just a remodeler. Of course you have them, but there's so much bleeding and crossover, and that carries over into the accounting practices and keeping everything straight. So we'll certainly dive into that. But I really do, I want to pick your brain just to start the conversation. Like, what are the three most common and costly errors that you find in construction accounting over your half a decade of experience?
Probably costing to the wrong project.
Okay.
Costing to the wrong cost code.
Okay.
And then having duplicates in your books.
Costing to the wrong job, costing to the wrong cost code, duplicates.
Yes.
Those seem like very rudimentary. Like very and I don't mean to be condescending. I don't.
Yeah, totally.
But like, it seems like that should be stuff that's just down packed. What's your take?
So what's complicated is like, I have yet to meet a builder that started their business and they're like, I just love bookkeeping and accounting, so I'm going to start a custom home building company, right? Like it never happens. They love building. They love, the process of all of it, but they know that they need to have their books and everything in line, but they really only focus on like getting it done, like 4 draws or 4 bill payments. And so it ends up becoming more of like a rush job than like a standardized, organized process.
Totally.
So because of that, things get messed up and things slip through the cracks, and it becomes a little bit of a nightmare to try to unwind it once everything goes off the rails.
Okay. Okay. Again, it's like, it's the have to task, or is that like that? Like, totally. That's what you're like, it's in 100%. Their mind. It's that I have to do it. I don't want to or like to do it. But then I feel like you kind of got it anchored in the back of like why you're in business is to make money. So now you're kind of stuck between this rock and the hard spot of a have to do task that you odds would say aren't equipped to do, but it's totally reliant on you making money as a business.
Totally. And so I mean, some of my builders, like truly, before we started working together, like, I can't believe that you are still in business today. Like, it is incredible. So like I joke that like they're lucky because they had no idea. They're like, I think we have money. I'm not sure. I feel like we've made money, but we don't know.
Okay.
And then you come in and you dig in, you're like, no, like you did make money. I have no idea how, but you did.
Okay, so
Because it wasn't on purpose.
you mentioned like joking and like there's like some like dramatic effect to the reality, but like do you have any
Sure.
examples of individuals where it's like they truly have no idea? Or like what does that actually mean? Is it like they wind up, they close the books at the end of the year, they've got $1 million in cash in the bank, and that's their green light of like we did something right? Or what is
Yeah.
it, what does that actually contextually mean when you come across a builder when you're like you truly don't have any money?
So I've got, kind of a wide span of types of clients, right? So I've
Mhm.
had like builders that, the builder's doing the building, they've got, either the wife or a family member, somebody helping doing the bookkeeping,
Mhm.
and they just like they aren't setting budgets the way that you would need to ensure profitability, right?
Sure.
So it's a custom job, they're doing it cost plus, and they start the process, and they've got the plans and all that. But as every custom builder knows, that what you planned for is not how the project finishes almost every time, because
Totally.
there's changes, the customer can't make up their minds, they want to make it fancier than they planned, and then they start looking at the budget like as the job happens, and they're like, oh, maybe we shouldn't have spent all that money on the front end, so what can we cut on the back end? So it becomes like an ebb and flow in the process, and it's not intentional, right? Nobody goes into the project wanting the books to be a mess or
Right.
wanting the numbers not to be straight. It's just because you want to be flexible with your customer. You want to make sure that you're giving them the house that they dream of, right?
Mhm.
And you don't want to be the person telling them, well, maybe you shouldn't spend that, because it's really none of your business what they spend, especially if it's a cost plus job.
Right.
So you go with the flow, and you realize toward the end of the job, you're like, wow, this is like way over what they were planning.
Right.
And then you have to start going, okay, well, like, where was the money spent? Because then the onus becomes on you as a custom builder to explain where the money went.
Okay, so okay, this is perfect. But like let's unpack some of this, because you'd mentioned like initially like the budget, right?
Yeah.
And I think budgeting it's almost similar to bookkeeping in the sense of like, well, yeah, we have budgets. Like, of course
Yeah.
we have budgets, but
Yeah.
are we maintaining them? And that goes
Right.
into probably your first problem of
Right.
categorizing cost to the right job, because that
Yes.
effectively is ensuring that whether it's in electrical, plumbing, footings, foundations, concrete, whatever the line item in that budget is, which is what we'll get into the struggles in
Right.
cost coding.
Yeah.
But the first step is just getting the cost to the right job.
Right.
And in terms of that, where does the challenge and the friction with that actually start happening for the builders? Like, what is
If
the difficulty
you
there?
if you send a project manager to Home Depot and tell them, hey, can you pick up materials for this job and this job?
Mm-hmm.
And they don't split the transaction, they don't give a PO number to Home Depot, you come back, you've got a receipt, and nobody knows what it goes to, because they don't give it to you until a month later, and then they don't remember what they bought on January 26th, and then you have to start guessing.
Well, yeah, but Melissa, it's only $500. It's only a couple $100. It's
Well,
not that big
right,
of a
yeah,
deal.
and if you do only a couple $100 every 3 or 4 weeks, then you have a lot of money. And most builders, like, if they don't know for sure which project it is, they're going to end up putting it into overhead, because
Got
they
it.
don't want to have to justify
Really?
the expense. A lot of my builders will go back and put it on overhead, and I'm like, well, wait a minute, like, which project was it? And they're like, well, we're not sure, and we don't want to tell the customer that we spent money on their project if we're not 100% sure. And then, like, I mean, that like kills your bottom line, right? Because you can't bill it out, and you're just eating the money. So it's like, okay, so you set up processes, right? Like, if you're going to Home Depot, you put in your job code.
Yeah.
So, and you split your transactions, or you write on the receipt in your truck and tuck that away in the door. Like, there has to be processes to
Sure.
ensure that we're keeping all of the little bits and pieces
Sure.
organized.
I think that is a huge tidbit. I've sold a lot of software to a lot of builders, a lot of service to a lot of builders, and I'd never heard typically they'll just like bury it in overhead, just almost to like avoid the conversation with the client. right?
Yeah.
But the other side, like you certainly like, yeah, that's chewing through bottom line. Like we call that cash leakage at
Yeah.
Adaptive, right? It's like you think you go into a project expecting like, let's just say like new construction, right? And ideally you're hitting like a 10% profit margin, not a
Sure.
10% markup, like a margin.
Right.
That's your
Right.
net profit. And if you're like chewing through hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars over multiple projects over the course of the year, like that's like pretty significant dollars
That's hard
and
money.
cents.
Yeah.
But even further, like more future thinking, you're making it damn near impossible to calculate accurate markup in the future if you're
You have no idea
reflecting
how much you spent.
inflated overhead.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
So
Yeah,
it's like
you have no idea what you actually spent on your projects because you have so much money that you've squirreled away into overhead.
brutal. Yeah. Okay. So that's the challenge. And like, and you know, what's like bringing this back for the listeners, like for the people that might be listening, they're like, dude, I have no problem. I have an office manager. I have a bookkeeper. I have someone who's doing
I love
this
that for you.
more.
I love that for you. Don't change anything.
Yes. And we have someone on top of it, but still it's not just on the bookkeeper, right?
Yeah.
It's not just on the office manager because there's that field to office communication that has to happen.
The whole team needs to work together.
Exactly. And it's like the person that's going to Home Depot and picking up $1,000 worth of material for two different jobs, and one job gets $250 and the other gets $750 for simple math. You've got to be calculating it. So what are some like situations, or I guess maybe not situations, but solutions that you've come across to help make that easier for your clients?
Adaptive is huge. So if you're snapping receipts as you get them, it's a whole lot easier to make sure you're capturing the expense and splitting it out. So even if you're not on the app, putting like adding the lines for the different jobs, write it on the top, right? Because you can always go back to that picture later, and it makes it super easy to know exactly. I mean, you could even bracket the amounts, like this part of the job is this project, this part of the job is this project.
Right.
Just any additional information you can give yourself. So, or the person that's working in the office, to specify exactly which job it is, you're going to be in much better shape.
Totally. Well, and you even mentioned like, so 100%, like bracketing it out, whether it is like a pen or you're on a product like Adaptive where you can like actually break it out by job or line item and cost code. Great.
Yep.
But you'd mentioned like well, I guess I mentioned the field to office communication. What are some of the tips and tricks that you've learned with like, let's call it the project manager that might be a little more squirrely or that might be a little more difficult, antiquated, resistant to tech? What are some little quick tips that you've found to instill the importance of the process, get them to adopt it, and at least communicate that to the bookkeeper, office manager, people like yourselves?
At a minimum, you don't want to use the app. Cool. You have the receipt, write on the receipt and make sure that it's legible. Like,
and then what happens when they don't? Is it just like a correction in the office? Like,
well, yeah, I mean, it ends up being a correction in the office. You drop off a pile of receipts that have stacked up in your truck for 3 weeks, and then you have the questions from the bookkeeper or the office manager. Like there's a role that I really like, it's the ops coordinator. So that's the person that's in the office, knows enough about bookkeeping to be, reasonably dangerous, but then also helps to do the communication with the team. So in that role, if you don't want to answer questions, because that's the other thing, you don't want to provide the information by writing it on the receipt, whatever, but then you don't want to answer questions either. Like that's the personality that becomes difficult to work with. Because like we get it. It is time bound to your day, but it is very important to make sure, like if your performance is based on metrics for project profitability, then it's pretty stinking important to make sure that you've got all of the information for your project, because if that cost isn't recorded, that cost can't be invoiced.
Love it.
It's that simple. So it's very important to get the team on board in whatever system and to ensure consistency.
Totally. No, I think this is great. And I think we're like, I guess maybe we haven't tapped into the second biggest time consuming, money wasting aspect of this is like getting the right code to the material labor. Expand on that for the listener. We've talked about the job, how to get that around, but what have you seen?
So the reason that the cost code is so important is because we've agreed to build this house for whatever amount we agreed to, right? And that isn't just some random number that we came up with. That's based on the amount of money we allocated for framing, the amount of money we allocated for the HVAC system. And even though some of those things may be allowances, we still need to make sure that the money that we're coding to that gets to the right bucket. Because if we have say design costs that got coded to the wrong code. Like maybe they didn't even make it to the project. Maybe they got coded to overhead.
Mhm.
And you end up closing out that section of the project. You're like, oh, we're not in design anymore. We're not like any money that's over budgeted there, we can reallocate that elsewhere. Either like telling the homeowner to say, hey, we were actually under budget on design by $2,500. Like
Mhm.
not a huge amount of money in the grand scheme of a giant custom project, but if you tell somebody like, oh yeah, you've got extra money in your budget, and then you realize later, once you start looking at your project reports, you're like, wait a minute, where's the design invoice for when they did this specific thing? Oh, I don't see that. Well, then you start researching who your vendor was, and you go down the rabbit hole to find it, and then you realize, oh, shoot, it's not even on our project. It's not on
Yeah.
that cost code. And then okay, if you've already communicated the $2,500, hopefully that's not already spent by the time you find it.
Yeah. Totally. Well, and so I'm hearing application for both like the fixed price builder and the cost plus
Yes.
builder in
Yes.
this. And like certainly like the latter example was, hey, like we're $2,500 under on design, like we're sitting good and like a cost
Yeah.
plus. But where do you see the application of that for more of like a fixed price builder of like finding underage? I think I've said that like a million
Underruns.
times.
I say underruns. Underruns or
Underruns.
overruns. Otherwise, it
Okay.
becomes
Yeah. Exactly.
edges and it's weird.
Yeah, but okay, so let's say I'm a fixed price builder and I see an underrun or an overrun. Like, what's the application there? And where I'm going with this is to motivate people to the importance of
Yeah.
categorizing not only the job but to cost code.
Yeah. So your fixed price builder, you rely on your budgets from previous jobs to help shape what you're doing in the future. So if you think your design cost is $2,500 less than it is, and you end up bidding out your next job thinking that, you're cutting your margin out the
Yeah.
gate.
Yeah.
So while you don't have to answer to a customer, it's still important for future planning purposes on your project to be able to
Totally.
capture that.
Okay, so you mentioned margin, but even like on another token, wouldn't that make you a more competitive builder if you are running fixed price and that like for the last 3 jobs, we've bid this out at 10 grand for design and
Yeah.
it's actually come in at 7,500 and we've lost a couple jobs just like very close on like 2,500 here, 5 grand there, 1,000 there. Wouldn't that be an advantage to coming in and saying like, okay, like historically, like we've been overbidding on all this work and we could be more competitive in the market by winning more work with tighter financials.
Absolutely.
So it's not only just like a margin play, it's a competitive
but if you don't
play.
but if you don't have the numbers, then you don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the other, I explain this too, is like, I explain like for fixed price builders and the importance of tracking cost is the fixed price model is a race to margin, right? And it's like, if you don't have that in real time, you touched on the immediacy earlier regarding like receipts and like the delay of just understanding cost.
Yes.
But even more so in fixed price world of like, I know the day that I got the invoice in, once it's approved, it's updated in the budget. I'm plugging adaptive here. But like, what does that timeliness do for fixed price builders, cost plus builders? What do you see the timeliness of understanding that data do for them?
I mean, just having the information available, you're able to pivot more readily, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I might not need the full budget. Fixed price builders, for example. Yeah, I might not be bidding like this, like it doesn't matter for this job necessarily, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm also in pre-construction on a fixed price job, and with all the market volatility that we're seeing in materials and everything, the more quickly you can identify your over under runs, even on a fixed price job, the better equipped you are to bid next job more successfully.
Totally. It makes all the sense in the world. Solutions. What have you seen? And it could be adaptive. It could be
like, no, I'm gonna plug adaptive because to get things to the cost code, one of the things that I love about adaptive is if I've got my HVAC contractors, we've got essentially 2 different for most of my clients, we'll have just a couple of HVAC codes, right? So we'll have trim, we'll have ref. Well, using adaptive, you have the AI built in. So from historical information, it knows the HVAC contractor is going to be, HVAC rough or trim. It sees rough on the bill
Mm-hmm.
and it codes it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of those end up being POs, but in instances it's not.
Mm-hmm.
It helps to have the AI coding it, because it's at that point you're just double checking what's already
Sure.
been assigned. And that makes the process a lot easier and also makes it more consistent.
Totally. Do you have any like just like off the top of your head like success stories with clients in terms of like adaptive working well, or just like really tight job costing, job and cost code examples, and like what that outcome actually looks like for them?
It becomes, I feel like every builder has their struggles, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for my builders that have been struggling with making sure that they have accuracy in their job costing,
Mm-hmm.
they start out having no idea. So they might not even be using cost codes, right? Like they might
Sure.
just be putting everything to like cost of goods sold, materials.
Material, labor. Yeah.
Yeah. Some of them don't even do that. Like I had a builder that was just doing purchases. Like
Yeah.
his cost of goods sold account was purchases. So it really, as you start doing job costing, you
Mm-hmm.
start to realize what an administrative burden it can be if you don't have a standardized process. If the person
Sure.
that's inputting that information doesn't know the budget
Mm-hmm.
or doesn't know what that provider's doing for the
Mm-hmm.
job, it
Mm-hmm.
becomes an administrative hurdle. So by
Totally.
having systems like Adaptive, as you start inputting the information, like you might not know everything when you first start, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like just like any job, any position anywhere, there's some stuff you're like, I came in like having a pretty good handle on it, but there's nuances to every business. Like I work with a lot of custom builders, and
Mm-hmm.
almost all of them have different nuances that you end up having to be familiar with. So by having a system to put that stuff into, whether that's Adaptive or another system,
Mm-hmm.
as you build, as you program it, it becomes smarter, faster, better at doing it. And then that frees up the person that's doing that task to go do other things for you. Like maybe they can start helping with estimating or
Mm-hmm.
putting together proposals because they're not spending the time capturing costs.
Totally. Totally. And we hear that regularly of like the time savings for sure.
Yeah.
But even I think just the like we have another partner, Chloe Brown. Do you know Chloe? She's in the DFW area. Have you ever met Chloe?
No,
You
no.
guys need to. Yeah, she's awesome.
Okay,
She does more like the operations side of the business.
nice.
She did like a deep dive on one of her clients' account and found like $5 million in unbilled cost. It was insane.
Ouch.
Yeah, yeah. But I'll put you in touch with Chloe. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, love that.
But with that said, it's like, yeah, of course, like the time savings and like the AI learning and doing it is great. But I think it's understanding the importance of having everything categorized out right. Yes, we're saving time on the administrative tasking that it
Yeah,
takes without a product like Adaptive, but the visibility
yeah,
into what this business is actually doing is like a huge component to this.
absolutely.
And I think that's just talking to you is a great resource just to bring that more full circle, because I think, yeah, AI is kind of the big, whether it's scary or exciting based on the
Right.
consumer,
I
it's
mean,
there, but it's the application of it. Right. And
yes,
what is this
it's how
actually
you
doing?
use it, like whether or not it's actually helping you move the needle forward or not. Because,
Totally.
I mean, we've all done, well, I did the action figure AI thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like you drop all that stuff in. Like, yeah, there's a lot of AI tools out there. Some of them are useful and some of them aren't.
Totally. Totally. And is it saving time? Is it giving you visibility? I think that's kind of
Yeah.
where like the race to AI is going to be interesting.
Yeah.
But to get back on track, so we've covered the difficulties and errors that come with categorizing to jobs, cost to jobs,
Yep.
to cost codes. The third, duplicate payments.
Duplicate
Tell me a little about
payments.
that. Why was that on your radar?
It was on my radar because I've had, within the last probably year or so, I've had quite a few folks that they'll have, like, they start to staff up. So maybe it was originally the builder doing all the like day-to-day input of bills and stuff. So like maybe they allow a stack throughout the week. Bills come in, they drop them in the stack. Then Thursdays they're uploading everything.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as the business grows, that becomes less scalable, right? They don't have
Totally.
the time. They've got to be out selling or doing, inspections on jobs, like all the things. And then you start bringing in more people to handle it. Well, if the builder added the bill to the books and then also the bookkeeper or the, admin person added it, not knowing that it was already in there, depending on the process that you're using to enter those, you may not even realize that you have a duplicate. And if there's a timing difference, if my process for uploading bills is I'm looking to see what's unpaid from last week, and if I don't see it on my list, I'm going to go ahead and upload it. Well, maybe the builder paid it before that. Maybe the builder paid it with a credit card.
How do you catch that? How do you catch the duplicate payment?
So duplicate payments, if both transactions are on the same side. So I consider expenses and bills kind of separate sides. So if you have two bills or two credit card receipts, that becomes easier to find. Hopefully, if you're using a credit card to pay a vendor, you're doing it through their link, and then you won't double pay because they have a link specific for that transaction, and you can't log in and do it again. But we all know it happens because we'll have the bill entered and somebody will have run the credit card and we didn't know, and then we get the bill and we're like, oh, well, we need to run bill payments this week, and you end up paying it out. So you can find it after the fact by looking at your project reports or vendor reports, and you see two amounts that are the same. But on the front end, if I had a bill in here, I paid it last week, and then somebody else is entering the same bill this week because the vendor didn't receive the payment yet, so they sent the invoice again thinking that we didn't get it, and then somebody enters it. If you don't have a system that flags it, it becomes difficult to see it before a payment actually goes out. So, another, I guess, plug for Adaptive, without being, too salesy, it is really helpful that if I put in, invoice 1076 from the electrician last week, paid it, and then I put in, bill 1076 for the electrician this week, it's going to flag it.
Totally.
And it does, and it works flawlessly. I've never had an issue where something wasn't flagged.
Sure.
And we've had instances where somebody's like, no, we didn't enter it, we didn't pay it. And I'm like, are you sure? So then I start digging. And I'm like, actually, we literally did. We did pay it. Oh, I didn't realize so-and-so paid that. And then you're like, good thing we have the system, because they would have just arbitrarily done it if there wasn't a flag in the system. So it becomes super helpful to catch it.
Well, and that even goes back to kind of that cash leakage comment of these are, I mean, on the low end, 4-figure, 5-figure, high end, 6-figure issues. That's a big deal. Double paying. And then again, you get into the conversation of going to a vendor or a sub and saying, hey, I double paid you. And then are they actually going to adhere to that? Or there's some under the table deal of hey, we double paid you, but we got this job coming up, just discount it off that. And it makes everything that much more difficult.
Yeah.
If you have that conversation. If you don't, that's just donated work.
Yes.
Damn. I love it. In terms of would you say that these practices happen broadly across smaller builders, larger builders? Does that even matter? Where do you see most of these mistakes happening with builders?
Typically, I see them in the builders that are growing and scaling. So once multiple people get involved, if they're not establishing these consistent processes to ensure that they're not duplicating efforts, that's when I see it. It's not usually the mom and pop builder, the builder and the brother, teaming up. It's not usually that, because usually in those situations, there's one person that's assigned to each role, and they almost exclusively adhere to that unless somebody's on vacation or whatever. It's usually when we're transitioning from that primary person doing it to bringing in a team, and then they're not sure who's actually going to have the responsibility for doing it, and multiple people get involved, and everybody's just trying to move stuff from their plate to somebody else. It becomes a juggle to try to figure out what's actually going to be a consistent, sustainable process for the company as a whole. And it's in those instances that I see it most common.
Totally. Well, and that's even like the delegation of work is one,
Yeah.
and just like the pass off of work is one. But even like the understanding of how to do it accurately
Yes.
is another big one. And that's where, like, I mean, we talk to people all the time and they'll be like, yeah, I've been doing this for 10, 15, 20, 30 years. Like, I've got this wrapped. But even for the people that are like switching bookkeepers, or maybe they're not, maybe we hear this all the time of like, I've got a bookkeeper, I pay him like $300 a month. And it's like, they're not like construction agnostic and like they don't understand the importance. They're just like getting costs in, categorizing it and moving it. And they don't understand like the seriousness behind it. So yeah, I mean, I think, for sure, just the delegation of work is one, but then even further, how to do it appropriately is the other big one.
Well, and I mean, as you're growing and as you're scaling, you bring people in, and like, there's an expectation that they're going to come with some of the like skills and expertise needed to perform the work. But a lot of times there's nuances that there was no way that they would be able to know. And if whoever's doing that role today either doesn't have the time, or maybe they've been operating a process that maybe is not the best. So it's a good opportunity to kind of rework, make sure that everybody's on the same page, but then also take the time to make sure that the person filling that role knows how important accuracy is.
Totally.
Because it feels like a paper shuffle. You come into an office and you're like, oh, there's a stack of receipts here that I need to put in because somebody's been driving around with them in a truck. And you're like, great, this is super fun. And it doesn't feel like it's super important. It feels like it's busy work, but it's not. It's super important to the budget, and the accuracy there is essential. It's not optional.
Totally. Well, and I think even just like to the mundane, tedious aspect of this is it's certainly not like devaluing the work, because we had a conversation with one of our partners and they focus purely on like tax and audit and like higher level accounting stuff. And they had made the comment that like bookkeeping is such a like foundational and important component to everything else that rolls up. And like, we're literally shooting this on tax day. Right. And how many builders, how many offices for the last quarter have been running crazy through the office, reconciling books. Why does 2024 not match? Oh, we're off this. Where's that receipt? What does this go to? Trying to make everything square. And it's just like, it's tedious by nature, but leveraging technology and processes help tremendously.
Absolutely.
And that's where I think like even just in conversation when people are evaluating tech or they're evaluating processes, like really looking at what is the outcome of this process enhancement? What is the outcome of this technology that we're bringing in? And is this going to be a process or technology that's going to be giving us clearer focus on what the important stuff actually is and making us more efficient and effective as a team? Or is this just another widget or another step that's unnecessary to accomplishing what we're ultimately trying to get done?
Right. We don't want to chase shiny object tech. We want to make sure that it's going to make a serious impact in the business and we're going to get our ROI.
Totally. I thought this was a great episode, Melissa. That's all I have. Do you have any final comments for the viewers here, or listeners rather, both?
Get your processes organized, especially like if you've got a smaller business and you're thinking about scaling. It is so much easier to scale and grow if you establish your processes. And this is true of any business. Like, it's true for my business. Like, if you know what your processes are, you know that you can duplicate them, and you communicate that in a way that other people can come in and go, oh, that's what you do, that's how you do it. Then it's much easier to bring in somebody and onboard them successfully, and not just have them show up to work one day and go, I'm not sure what you do. I'm not sure why you're here, but I know I need help.
Totally. No, I think that's great. And especially just, where the economy is right now. And, there's some people holding their breath with all the tariffs and interest rates, and we're still sitting and staring down the barrel of like a massively underserved inventory.
Yeah.
It's like, now's the time to be focusing on this stuff.
Yes.
Get type process, get type business, know what you're scaling, right? And that's even applicable to this. Know what costs go to what jobs, what cost codes, and make sure that you're not double paying stuff. So that when you do scale, you know that you're scaling a product that makes you money.
Yeah, that is sustainable.
Totally. Melissa, I appreciate you so much. Thank you for jumping on.
Thanks for having me.
Of course.
You too.
All right, see ya.